Hello and welcome to Series 2 of Æducate, the podcast from Avernus Education. Each episode presents a series of interviews and discussions with various inspirational individuals who are pioneers and leaders in their field. Whether you're a student, a parent, or an education professional, welcome to the podcast. We hope it offers a valuable opportunity to learn from the best and stay informed about the most pressing issues and debates in the world of education and beyond. Connect, tune in, Æducate. Hello and welcome to Series 2 of Æducate, the podcast from Avernus Education. Today, it's an absolute pleasure to be joined by H-J Colston, the director at Engage with China. H-J, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always up for talking about China and education.
H-J has been at the forefront of the China-UK space for over 20 years and is committed to the building of bilateral relations. China's significance on the world stage is indisputable, from AI to trade, climate change to education, and undoubtedly equipping pupils in schools to understand more about China today is clearly vital. H-J, I wonder if we can begin by just sketching out where your fascination with China started.
Well, it's a long story, but I'll be brief. So 30 years ago, more, actually, I beg your pardon, 40 years ago, almost. I'll start again. 1985, I was invited by a school friend. I was at boarding school. She was English, but her father was the general manager at the time of the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. And she asked me to go to Hong Kong for the Easter holidays. And bearing in mind that I grew up in a tiny village of about 200 people, where there wasn't much going on except the church, the village shop, and a couple of pubs, but I was too young for those. You can imagine how exciting and unbelievably incredible it was to land in Hong Kong with the Star Ferry, that cityscape, those neon lights, the night markets, all those things. I was a teenager who just didn't know about city life, and I'd never been to Hong Kong before. I had been to Malaysia, but this was something else. And I felt illiterate. I felt out of my depth, and I felt, how come I have never learnt about China or Hong Kong in all of my education to date? And I could read the English on the signs, but they were all very helpful. But there was an illiteracy not just in the language, but my understanding of the culture. And we went on a day trip to China, and that trip took us over the border by the slow trains, that as they were then, to Guangzhou via Shenzhen, which was nothing back then. It was fields and flat, and we went to visit a duck farm and an orphanage. And now roll on several decades, and Shenzhen is China's fourth largest city and massive container port, and like Silicon Valley for China. And who wouldn't be fascinated about China to then be witness, as I have been over multiple visits and studying and living there ever since, to watch how China has changed and sort of taken hold of itself and become one of the world's newest countries, as well as obviously its ancient civilization self.
Yes.
So I find it fascinating. So having been to Hong Kong that time, I then decided to go to China, and my way to get there was to study Chinese at Durham University.
And I suppose now you've got a real passion for equipping other people with, particularly pupils and those in education, with the knowledge that they need to actually understand China better and to see some of those opportunities that it presents. What do you see, I suppose, at the moment as some of the main opportunities, but maybe also challenges that need to be navigated?
So 2015, when President Xi came to the UK and visited David Cameron and came to see the Queen and so on, and we were in that golden era, and everyone was all over China like a rash, and it was all very positive, I think, for China and UK business opportunities and so on. And of course, as we all know, that's sort of gone very much downhill since, to the point where I'm finding it's so binary, the conversation that one can have about China on any level, not just about it on education. And you're either for China or you're not. It's very black and white. And actually, if there's any suggestion that you might be kind of for China, that's not woke these days. And it's a really difficult path to tread. But it is my absolute conviction that more than ever, we need to be understanding what China is like, where it's going, its vision for itself, its self-confidence. You know, population size alone, 1.4 billion people, it's too big a number for us even to comprehend. But that number means that China, whether we like it or not, is having a massive influence on the rest of the world. And why wouldn't we want to teach our children about what China is like? And it's often people who've never been to China or Hong Kong, never had a look for themselves, are dissing China before even giving it a chance, because the prevailing narrative is very negative. And I know it's the same in reverse. I think, Chinese media has not been particularly positive about, obviously, the States, but I think our position, we're sort of going along with the US, that's had a negative impact on the relationship. So media plays a role, and I think educational and face-to-face exchanges are maybe at times like this, the only way that we can keep dialogue open.
Yes, no, I agree with you there. So in some ways, is it a sort of lack of understanding on the one hand, but also sort of a misunderstanding of certain issues on the other. And starting with bright young minds seems like the right approach, and that's what Engage with China does, isn't it? You're trying to enable young people to better understand China and to understand more about China, and to, I suppose, that for China pathway, make that more appealing, more accessible.
Absolutely. I was saying earlier that during my school career, we never learned anything about China. Young people today are still not learning anything about China. In the national curriculum at primary school, there's one area in Key Stage 2 history where the Shang dynasty is mentioned as in brackets, a culture that schools can teach. And there are some visionary schools that are either teaching Mandarin or have even developed a history module, for example. I mean, we've been working with the King's School in Worcester, and based on a lecture that I gave, they developed a history module for their year 9s and about Chinese maritime history, and that's absolutely fantastic. But we know through the publication of various higher education policy institute reports and reports coming out of the government that the UK lacks China capabilities. Mm-hmm. But who's doing anything about it? I've been to the Department of Education and they say, oh, very interesting, yeah, love what you do, but there's no money. So we are filling a need, but it's very driven personally by the team, the core team at Engage with China, and our charity trustees and directors, that this is a national need. I suppose we're just wanting to say, look, as part of a modern day education, children have to know something of China. Just pique their interest. Just let them know that China's not just over there, 5,000 miles away, But let's face it, look around, look at these hundreds of thousands of Chinese students who are here at our universities. You work with some of those, and they're here, and they know and are learning and absorbing British culture and English, the English language. So many ambassadors potentially for the UK are studying here, but the numbers doing anything to do with China are pitiful, and I just don't think that gives us in the UK any competitive edge. I think it lacks global vision and awareness. And I go back to my earlier point, is that whatever we think about China, like it, hate it, don't know, but it tends to be either like it or not like it, that Marmite effect. We just need to engage with China. That's why we call the charity. It's not saying you have to like it. We're just saying we need to know about it.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Æducate, the Avernus Education podcast. For those that don't know, Avernus Education provides inspiration and direction to students, helping them get ahead of the competition and maximise their chances of success. We work in collaboration with students, parents and schools to support young learners in their educational pathway, no matter what phase of the journey they are in. From university admission mentorship to subject knowledge enhancement, we provide clarity and guidance to students in order to help them discover their passion, support them in decision making, and develop a personalised roadmap to further their ambitions and guide them to achieve their academic goals. Presumably, you can really see when you go into schools, children don't hide too many secrets. It's quite obvious when they're engaging with something or not. And have you seen, really positive uptake and engagement with some of the projects? I think challenge days, I read something like that on your website. How have you found, actually the students engaging with that message? Because it, as you said, it's not only a sort of sensible thing to be doing for their future careers and understanding of the world and leaders of tomorrow, but it's vital, isn't it, that they do pick this up and take it forward? And have you sort of sensed that passion or spark has been ignited when you've gone into schools?
Great question. And I can say hand on heart that yes, we've seen sparks igniting, and of course we haven't been going long enough to be able to track whether somebody that we've taught in year 3 or 4 in primary school has decided to go to university to study Chinese. But you've been a teacher, how when you see somebody really engaged in a class, and it won't be everybody all day, every day, but when kids have engaged, and we tend to interview a few at the end of a challenge day. So it's 5 hours of off timetable curriculum enrichment time, so during term time, and we ask them a few questions, and there have been some wonderful comments that sort of make you laugh out loud in some sometimes. Miss, I speak a bit of French and a bit of German because my parents are French and German, but I'd really like to learn a language like Mandarin so I could speak in secret and they wouldn't know. That's fine. Or when the spy balloon saga blew up, and I was that week I was in a school, and how old was he? He was year 6, so he was 11. And actually, I find it very rare, whether they're in primary schools or secondary schools, that pupils actually are aware at all about the political backdrop. Honestly, nobody really seems to have any knowledge about China whatsoever. Yeah. But this 11-year-old kid, I was really impressed. He said, whether or not there are spy balloons, I think China's a really fascinating country, and I would urge anyone to go there. And I just thought, I haven't talked about spy balloons today. So he's been speaking about that at home, or he's seen it on the news, engaging with that, putting that here, on one side, whilst he learns about China's population and where people live and climate change and how we need to work together or so on. And you don't have to have one or the other. You can hold those things in tension. It's really positive.
That's the impact, isn't it? Sometimes it's hard to measure in schools directly, but those kind of conversations make it very clear. And I'm glad you mentioned language, actually, because I was wondering the extent to which actually the ability to speak Mandarin would obviously, facilitate that pathway and that understanding and that engagement with China further. I mean, could schools, practically speaking, be doing more to bring Mandarin into the curriculum further? How do we get students going on to study Mandarin at university?
It's quite a hard one. I've studied Mandarin. I did that at university. It's a really hard language to learn. It required unbelievable dedication and commitment and hard work, but an absolutely fascinating window onto Chinese culture, as is studying any language. It enables you to embrace and engage and communicate with people from that country at a much deeper and richer level. But I sense that trying to get Mandarin onto the curriculum in schools in the UK, unfortunately, is like suggesting that we all go and climb the Eiger. I mean, we Brits are not good at learning languages. I'm afraid to say I feel that we're a bit conceited, and in the sense that we know that English is the language of business, and wherever we go around the world, there tends to be somebody who speaks English. And my goodness, we're really lucky. It's so fortunate that is the case. But it doesn't make us hungry to learn languages. The Mandarin for Excellence program is a great program, part funded by the Chinese government and the British government. But that's only 70 schools, state schools in this country. I heard a statistic recently that I think there may be something like 10,000 youngsters learning Mandarin across the country. It's very hard actually to get statistics.
Yes.
But it's a trifling number. It's a drop in the ocean. I think if you're going to learn, you need to commit a lot. And in our China Challenge days, yes, we do teach a little bit of Mandarin, but it's just it's an engaging way, and kids love to be able to say a few words in another language, particularly if they're in primary school, and we do secondary as well. But knowing how to say a few phrases is great. But I think it's a big ask, probably, in schools. Having said which, those that are doing it to GCSE, they're getting to a reasonable level, but their numbers are not big.
Yeah.
And I think if it may be another question, or I'll just keep going, sort of, what's the next step? Those that get to GCSE and they may want to go and do, an A-level. Unfortunately, the A-level is geared to native speakers, which means that it's very hard for a non-native British student to get an A or an A star. And if you need those high grades to get into the university of your choice, it's probably not the wisest A-level subject choice. So that is a barrier. And then, of course, when you get to university, if you then decide you want to do that, well, the universities themselves, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm painting a really negative picture, and I don't mean to, but the universities are now having to offer 2 courses, one for those who are just starting from scratch, like I did, and we caught up with those who had done, when it was O-level then, I hasten to add, they had done, we caught up with them in a term.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a difficult balance, I think. But what really, again, saddens me and shocks me is that on the basis of what you and I both know, and I've alluded to already, China has changed enormously in the last 40 years. So you would think that more people would be going to university to study Chinese because they're interested to know what this country is like. But when I studied in 1989, I started, 1989, there were 2,000 of us all over the country in 6 universities that taught Chinese studies then. There are many more universities that do it now, not necessarily full Chinese, but the number has halved. 1,000 undergraduates in the UK doing Chinese. And China is this mega superpower.
Yeah. And especially, as you say, in this kind of almost bounce back, COVID bounce back, where presumably the trends that we're seeing are now only going to accelerate and increase in terms of China's influence on the world and the potential opportunities for British, Chinese, engagement. I guess hard maybe to look ahead, but of all the different areas of education, of global jobs, or innovating for a more sustainable future, do you have a sense of which one, if there was a particular strand that would stand out, is going to be, when we're talking again in 30 years' time, would have made the greatest impact on the world? Is there a particular strand in these relations that's moving faster than others?
So I think AI, China's just streets ahead. I think it's, as with other nations around the world, the race for the battery, for the electric vehicle and for storage is going to be the key driver for the future of the world economy. And China's making great strides there. More EV cars being produced there than anywhere in the world. And I was living in China when people couldn't even own a private car. We're talking 20 years of unbelievable change in China. And I think that's the thing that just keeps coming back to me. The only constant in China for decades now is change. And that somehow makes Chinese people, in my opinion and what I've observed, so resilient. And that they are quick to take up the next tech, try the next app, because everything is changing around them. And, they never bothered with checkbooks, for example, or credit cards, really. They just went straight to WeChat and Alipay. And, we're quicker to do that than we had Apple Pay. And certainly in terms of adoption, they are incredible in terms of being earlier adopters. So there are mindset differences. And if the Chinese want to get something done, and it's a good idea, things happen really fast. And there's an example of the Chinese high-speed rail network. Again, that's a phenomenal story of growth and interconnectivity and enabling of new markets and communities, new jobs, and so on. And I went to visit a school in Nansha in Guangdong in October. Amazing school called Minxin School. And it was built in 9 months during COVID.
Wow.
And to accommodate 900 boarding school pupils. 9 months to build something from the ground up. China gets things moving. Yeah. And there are lots of lessons for us to learn there. There's a lot of red tape here. Mm-hmm. There are projects that we promise and spend billions on, and then they get shelved and abandoned. our one high-speed rail and HS2, and now it's not even happening. And whether I go back here, whether we like it or not, it's just it's important that we see how other people do things and what effect that has on their society and the dynamism of their economy and their psyche.
No, for
so,
sure.
And for what it does for opportunity. And I think maybe in this country, is there a slight sense of, well, the hopelessness at the moment, maybe, and post-Brexit.
Well, and the
political
situation in the UK, as you say there, is one of sort of slightly lost at sea, rudderless, hopelessness in some areas. With the election coming up, what's going to be the main things on the agenda there? Are we going to see a dramatic change in sort of approach, do you think, from the British government to China should Labour get into power?
I think Parliament has been quite divided, but there is a strong anti-China voice, I think, at present. And there are various groups, I think, who are open to learning more. But I would hope that, and in fact, I went to an event in Manchester a couple of weeks ago that was the 6th China-UK Economic and Trade Forum. And our Minister of State for Business and Trade, Lord Dominic Johnson, was there and spoke with great passion about all the opportunities that not only Manchester has and with China, but what strengths there are in the UK within our capabilities, including engineering, including in renewables and so on, where there are so many opportunities for growth. And there was a real sense in that room, and there were 300 or so of us there from business and trade and education, who were there because we want to be engaging more and feel that there are so many benefits to be had. So I think there are some noises suggesting that this would be a good thing. Again, on that platform, there was a suggestion that actually maybe our relationship won't improve politically, but actually we can still do business together. And I think when it comes to things like climate change and future crises for the world, pandemics, for example, we have to have some sort of dialogue and relationship with a country as big as China if we have any hope at all to resolve them. And if you shut down all channels, then there is no chance for dialogue. So I would hope that a new parliament, a new government will, whoever they are, might be more open to engagement. And we've got David Cameron back as our Foreign Secretary. He was there with President Xi drinking a pint in the local pub, as we will all remember.
He was indeed,
back in
yeah.
2015. So I haven't heard him specifically talking about China, but I hope that there may be something that can be leveraged from that time.
Yeah. And if I can just finish by asking you one last question, linking climate change, but also back to the work that you're doing with Engage with China. One really exciting event that I think you're organizing in the new year, February 24, right. A sort of global MUN, Model United Nations, for listeners that don't know about it, but I think many will, because it's such a popular kind of platform for 15 to 18-year-olds to embrace some of these challenges, to talk about the future. For any individuals that are listening to this, or schools, how do they get involved, and what can they look forward to in that event?
Thank you. So it's an online conference, and we have 20 2 or 3 schools so far are signed up. We could have 2 or 3 more, but that's going to be about 350 students from across multiple time zones, from Brazil, China, Hong Kong, UK, Ireland, Zambia, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong. Yeah, it's fantastic. The Caribbean coming on stream as well this time. And the purpose of MUN is to get students to research, so they build those skills, teamwork, negotiation, of course, but all from the perspective of another country, not their own. So they're having to put themselves into one another's shoes. And I think in some ways that's what Engage with China does. It just says, let's just look at the world from a broader perspective. Of course, some of the schools that are taking part, and we almost had Harrow Hainan join us. I know you were at Harrow for a while, but they couldn't because of holiday times. But we've got Lancing and Marlborough, for example, famous public schools in the country. But actually, we're really keen to always, with this MUN, to involve state schools which don't have the benefit of having students alongside them who come from all over the world. So to have on a Zoom live in a live scenario, but not physically face to face, Chinese students from 6 or 7 schools across China, as well as from these other countries that I've spoken about, is a really powerful platform. And because we're also mixing up state and private school students, we're kind of creating a platform that is more true to life. And the Model UN circuit in the UK, apparently, that you have a southern school circuit and you have a northern schools circuit. So we're mashing that up as well. And so we're changing the dynamic. We're building opportunity. We're trying to do some leveling up. And I think testament to the fact that it is a really valuable enrichment activity is that we have schools coming back for the 3rd time this year, in February. And our ambassador to China, Dame Caroline Wilson, will be speaking at the conference, as well as some really senior figures from industry and the green, the environmental sector. So we're looking forward to great debate from the students themselves, and it is a student-led event, but they will also be inspired by hearing from people who are inspirational, that helps them to look, do you know what, that could be me one day. And it's all about inspiring cross-cultural skills, global outlook, and empathy. I think this world needs a lot of empathy right now, more kindness, more tolerance. And that comes through education. And that's where you and I work, in that field, trying to give the next generation a bit of a leg up for the world that they're stepping out into.
Absolutely. Well, very best of luck with the event. I'm sure it'll be a tremendous success, and I'm excited just hearing about it.
Thank you very much. Well, if you've got any schools that you think might want to join, they can get in touch.
Super. Thank you very much. H-J, it's been a real pleasure to chat today. H-J Colston, Director at Engage with China. Thank you for your time and for speaking with Avernus Education today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Lovely to meet and to talk.